All right. Good morning. Thank you for attending this session. My name is Kulpreet. I'm a software engineer in localization, and I'll be joined by my colleagues, Vivian and Arthur. In this session, I'll be going over some exciting new localization features in our platforms. Vivian and Arthur will then touch on some new tooling in Xcode 11, including some great enhancements to localization workflows, localizing images, and how you can use testing to generate screenshots of your app in any language. Today, we estimate over 70% of our users are outside the United States. Localization is an opportunity for you to expand your reach and capture new markets with your app. At Apple, we care deeply about creating a great experience for all of our users around the world. This year, we have a host of new features and improvements for our multilingual and international users. To name a few, in iOS 13, we have keyboards for 38 new languages. I'm sure if your language is up there, you're really excited. We also have a new setup flow that guides multilingual users to the right language settings. Now, one of these features I'm particularly excited about, and I want to dive a bit deeper with you. In iOS 13, there's a new setting that appears for multilingual users in your app settings page. I'm happy to say that users can now set the language of your app independent of the system language. If a user has a connected watch, the setting will also sync to the accompanying watch application. And similarly, on macOS, users can set the language of an app via language and region preferences. This is important because in multilingual regions, users may prefer to use different languages in different contexts. In a region like Hong Kong, someone might read their news in Chinese even though they do their banking in English. In India, a student will go to school and learn in English even though they come home and speak Hindi with their family. Apps are windows into these interactions we have every day. And this new setting allows users to choose a language that reflects their preference for your app. Now, this works for your app out of the box and for free if you're using all of our standard foundation APIs for localization. But there are a couple things to keep in mind to make this work great for your users. First, do not attempt to set the application language manually in code. Our APIs do a lot of work to ensure users get the right language and font fallbacks. If you do need to add the option within your app to switch languages, we recommend you launch into settings where users can go in and switch the language of your app. Next, when the user does change the language of your app will be relaunched in the target language. Now, to make this language change a seamless experience for the user, we recommend you adopt state restoration APIs. In iOS 13, there are some new state restoration APIs with NS user activity. To learn more about how you can use them, you can check out this talk on Friday. And finally, it's important that all of your content is shown consistently in one language throughout your app. If you're doing some custom or server-side resource loading, there are a handful of APIs that might be useful for you to determine which language to request that content in. Let's go over a few of them. Locale APIs are useful for fetching the user's language and region preferences. Locale.preferredLanguages returns a list of languages in order of user preference. Now, this list might be useful to you if maybe you're building an app that needs to handle multilingual content, and you need to fetch resources such as fonts for all of the user's languages. Now, one thing to note is that locale.preferredLanguages will return the language list, the user's preferred languages, regardless of the languages your application bundle supports. So it's not useful for getting the current running application language. To get the current running application language, we can use bundle APIs. And bundle APIs are useful for language matching. Bundle.main.preferredLocalizations considers both the user preferred languages and the languages that your application bundle supports, and returns a list of languages your application bundle supports in order of user preference. Now, if you have an external list, say if you're loading some remote content from a server, and your server has a different set of supported languages, you can use the class method bundle.preferredlocalizationsFrom. And this will also consider that third language from your server. Now, to help walk you through this feature and what it means for your apps, I'd love to jump into a demo. OK. So last year, we demoed Vacation Planet, the first interplanetary travel booking app. And we've since expanded the app to be able to book complete travel experiences. We have this new Discover tab with the collection view that shows some of our great offerings in these thumbnails, like this romantic space cruise to Pluto, or moon yoga. Now, some of these are seasonal offerings, like this WWDC after party. And because this is a seasonal offering, this content is actually pulled from our server. So this image and this great description about how this is the first interstellar bash and how we're going to be going on a ship with an onboard seafood restaurant, the Cotable, is actually being pulled from our server. Now, after reading that description, I think this looks great, and I'm ready to book. But as you know, WWDC attendees come from all around the world, and they might prefer to do their travel booking in a different language. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the Profile tab, where we have a table view cell that shows the current running application language. And when I click on that, it's going to pop me right into settings where I can click in to see a list of all the languages my application supports. I'm going to go ahead and change this to French. And when I go back, you can see that the system UI is still in English. But when I go back to Vacation Planet, the app will relaunch, and it'll be in French. Now, one thing you'll notice is that it actually brought me right back to where I left it. And that's because I've adopted those state restoration APIs. And you can see now all of our strings and all of our date formatters are in French, which is great. But when I go to that server-side loaded content, I can see that that is still in English. Now, that seems problematic because we want to be consistent in our app, and we want the app to be in one language. So let's take a look at what might be going on there. So I'm here in our collection view controller. And I have this method, loadDiscoverItems, that downloads that content from the server. And when we download that content, we actually need to pass in a language, because the server needs to know, well, what language are we fetching that content in? And here you can see that the language I'm passing in is locale.preferredlanguages.first. As I mentioned before, locale.preferredlanguages is going to return the user's preferred languages, regardless of the languages my application supports. And so this could be something like Persian that my application doesn't necessarily support. Now, ideally, I'd like something that I'll consider the server's supported languages, my application bundle supported languages, in order of the user's preferences. So I'm going to start by fetching the server's supported languages. You can see that here. And then I'm going to use that bundle API, that class method on bundle preferred localizations from, and I'll pass in the available server localizations. And now the first element of this will be the best language to request that content in from the server. So I went ahead and I rebuilt. And we'll wait a couple seconds for it to relaunch. And you can see now that image and all of that content is in French. Isn't that great? Cool, so I'm ready to book, and I can't wait to see you guys all at this Interstellar Bash. All right. So to summarize, app language setting allows users to choose a language for your app. Launching to settings is the best way to allow your users to switch the language of your app. Use state restoration to make that language switch a seamless experience for the user. And finally, if you're doing some custom or server-side resource loading, be sure you're using the right bundle or locale API for your use case. I'm incredibly excited for all of the great features and enhancements we've worked on this year, and can't wait to see how you're going to bring your apps to an international audience. Now, to tell you how we've made it easier for you to do just that, I'd like to call up Vivian. Vivian?
Thanks, Gurpreet. So let's talk about some of the enhancements to the localization tooling in Xcode. And this year, we've done a lot of things you've been asking for, so this is going to read a little like a wish list. First up, performance. So I'm very excited to announce that exporting projects with lots of interface builder files for localization is now, on average, 15 times faster. So this means if you had a project that was taking about a minute, that's going to be down to 4 seconds. And we did this by redesigning the string extraction process. So the more interface builder files you have, the bigger an improvement you're going to see. Also, to really speed up and streamline your workflow, don't bother with calling genstrings or IBtool directly. Instead, use Xcode build, export localizations, and import localizations to take care of creating all of your strings files. Next up, iPad apps for Mac. So you may be really excited about bringing your iPad apps to Mac, but maybe you have some strings that wouldn't make sense. Maybe something that says tap here, but the user would now be using a mouse with a cursor, and they'd be clicking. Or here in News, you can control series suggestions in settings if you're on the iPad, but that would be in the app's preferences on a Mac. And of course, you want to have that one NS localized string call that's already in code. So to help with this, we're introducing a new strings dict rule for device-specific strings. And this rule can be combined with the plural and variable width rules. So you can use this for any of your existing strings, even if they're already in a strings dict file. So the new rule is NS-string device-specific rule type, and the supported device keys are Apple TV, Apple Watch, iPad, iPhone, iPod, and Mac. So it's not just for iPad apps on Mac. And your strings dict will look something like this. At the top, your existing string key, then the new rule, NS-string device-specific rule type, and inside, a dictionary with all of your device-specific strings indexed by those device keys. For more on iPad apps for Mac, please check out the session, Taking iPad apps for Mac to the Next Level. Next up, Settings Bundle. Settings bundles are now included in your Xcode localization catalogs. So these are as easy to localize as anything else in your project. Now, one of the more significant improvements we made to the localization tooling in Xcode is in how you localize assets. So until now, in order to localize an image, it needed to be an independent file in your project. And this may have meant you had some files in your